Alrighty guys, so today we're going to be looking at the properties of parallelograms, and before I actually get into the notes, I'm going to make this first video because I want you to visually see these properties that we're going to talk about. I'm trying to avoid you just having to look at the notes and figure out what it means, because I want you to actually see it. So I'm going to use this site called GeoGebra, and I'm going to make us a parallelogram and then show you the properties I'm going to be talking about in the notes later, okay? So first I've made this coordinate plane because it's going to help me graph my parallelogram, and then I'll just make the grids go away. We can look at what I'm talking about. So let me get my points going. Let's do this. Let's do there. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 2, put one there. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, put one there. Let me double check that. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. All right. Those are going to be my vertices. So now I'm going to use this polygon tool and actually make the polygon, make the parallelogram. Okay, put that back on. Now I'm going to go turn the grid off and turn the axes off. So now I have a parallelogram. So let me move the vertices so you can see. Okay. So the way I made it, it is a parallelogram. So remember, a parallelogram is defined as a quadrilateral, a four-sided shape that has two sets of parallel sides. So we would say that AB and CD are parallel, and then AC, BD are parallel. Okay? So the first property that we're going to look at in the notes is going to be about opposite sides. So what I'm going to do is actually measure the opposite sides. So I'm going to select this distance tool. Oops, there we go. And I'll click that one and that one. So I'm going to scoot these over a little bit. So now look at those links. Those are the actual measurements of what I constructed, the actual measurements. I think they're in centimeters, or it doesn't really matter. But look at the opposite sides. So look at the sides that are across from each other. Do you notice they're the same things? That's not a coincidence. That's supposed to happen. So the first property of a parallelogram is that the opposite sides are congruent, which we should remember that means equal. So the first property that we'll talk about in the notes later is that opposite sides are congruent. Okay, now I'm going to leave that on there for a minute. The second thing we're going to look at is the opposite angles. So now we're going to look at the angles that are across from each other. So this time I have to select the Measure and Angle tool. And I have to select 3 points. So angle C, we would say, is 123.7 degrees. Now let me get all the other ones. Okay. Let me scoot this out where we can see everything. So now look at the opposite angles. So look at the angles that are across from each other in the shape, not next to, across. So these two are 123.7. These two are 56.3. What can we say about opposite angles now? Well, we can say they are congruent. Remember, they're equal. So the ones that are opposite are equal. And that always happens with a parallelogram. That'll be the second property that we'll talk about, that opposite angles are congruent. Okay? Now the third property is related to these angles, but now we're going to look at the same side. So look at the angles that are on the same side of the shape. Either way you look, on the same side. They're not the same, but what would happen if you added those two together? Now I'm not, oh, I can pull up a calculator. Uh-huh. No, I can't. Can I? Let me see. I'm trying to find one. Anyway, the way I've got this video going, I can't pull it up where you can see it. But if you add 123.7 plus 56.3, you should equal 180 if you add those two together. Now that's a very important property because we talk about this all the time, especially in Part A. In a parallelogram, in every parallelogram, the angles on the same side, so we could say same side, or you could also hear the word consecutive. So same side angles are supplementary. Remember, supplementary means they add up to 180 degrees. All right. Now, to help us see the next property, I'm going to clear out some of this stuff. Okay. So back to the original. What I'm going to do now is actually draw the diagonals, or construct the diagonals. Hang on, I messed it up. There we go. Sorry. Okay, so the two diagonals going across. And then at the intersection, I'm going to put us a point. If I could get it on the point. There we go. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the entire diagonal, both diagonals, and then both pieces. All right. So so I can't really, oops. Wrong one. Okay, so I'm going to move this down here. So AD, that's the entire diagonal, is 7.6. So now I'm going to measure the pieces. So A to E, and then D to E. Now let me move those so we can see right where they're at. Okay. So remember, this one is the hole that I'm hovering on, and these two are the pieces. So notice that if you 3.8 plus 3.8, you get back to 7.6. So we can say this diagonal's been cut in half. So now let's do CB. Let me scooch him out of the way. Come back and do the pieces. So now I'll scooch these two where they go. Okay. So CB, C to B, that's the entire diagonal, and it was 4.2. And then I measured the two pieces. They were both 2.1. So again, this entire diagonal has been cut in half. And the same thing happened with the other diagonal. And that is a property of the parallelogram, is that when the two diagonals intersect with each other here in the middle, they cut each other in half. Right? So AD was 7.6. So when AD was cut by CB, it cut it in half. See that? And then the same way, when CB 4.2 was touched by AD, it cut CB into two equal pieces. Right? So that's the fourth property, is that we say the diagonals of a parallelogram cut each other in half, or the fancy word for that is bisect. So the diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. Right? That'll be the fourth property that we look at. Okay, that's all the properties we're going to talk about today. So the whole purpose of this video was to show you visually those properties. So remember we had opposite sides congruent, opposite angles congruent, same side angles are supplementary, and then the diagonals bisect each other. Okay? So make sure we watch this one first, and then we go and watch the notes video.